Hey, Hannah Mouse 1 here. Now, I'm a pretty big fan of Five Nights at Freddy's. Not of playing the games per se, but of the timeline, the theories, the lore! Christ, how does MatPat do that? Speaking of MatPat, I'm sure that you're aware that he recently released his Ultimate FNAF timeline, and I'm taking the word ultimate with a huge pinch of salt because ultimate implies final, and he and Scott both seem to have forgotten the definition of the word. And overall, I really enjoyed the story he laid out. It's a nice story that wraps up just about as many loose threads as any timeline can with this franchise, and I don't want to step on any toes here, but this series is so complex and convoluted at this point with so many threads that seem to contradict themselves that I don't think that any one timeline can truly solve for every piece of evidence. And there's one piece of evidence that I want to explore today. I reread all three of the Silver Eyes novels, and I want to break them down for you today. And before you say anything, I know these books have very dubious levels of canonicity, but there are plenty of reasons that I want to take things in this direction. Firstly, to say that the books have questionable canonicity, Help Wanted confirms that all of the FNAF games are just that, games, a quote-unquote elaborate cover-up to make light of what happened at the pizzeria. So as far as I can tell, the evidence from the games even hardly counts as true evidence anymore, so I think we can give the books a little leeway, no? Secondly, the Freddy file said that thoughtful fans might want to give the books a closer look to determine how they impact the story of the games as well, so there is precedent for taking the books as a source of evidence. In fact, the books provided information to the games that's undeniably canon at this point. The killer was revealed to be William Afton long before the games confirmed it after all. Thirdly, even if these books are in a separate canonicity to the games, then they must still have their own canonicity, no? Their own story, their own timeline of events. Even if that isn't part of the game's story, there is still a story to be told here, and I want to see where that story leads. Finally, it's my channel. I can do what I like. If you don't like it, don't watch it, I guess. I'm going to start by running through what happens in each book so you're all caught up if you haven't read the things or if it's just been a while. If you want to skip straight to my thoughts on them, skip to the timestamp on the screen or navigate through the video chapters to my breakdown. But enough of all that, starting with the Silver Eyes. Charlie, daughter of one of the founders of Freddy Fazbear's Henry, is returning to her once childhood home of Hurricane, Utah for a commemoration for Michael Brooks, a child who went missing 10 years earlier in a series of disappearances at the aforementioned Freddy's. Charlie reunites with some of her childhood friends, John, Jessica, Carlton and Marla, and throughout the books they revisit the old Freddy's location, now shut down and boarded up with a mall built around it. Charlie's also haunted by childhood memories, specifically the abduction of her twin brother Sammy at an earlier location of Freddy's, Fredbear's family diner. On one of their jaunts to the Freddy's, they get caught by a security guard called Dave, who instead of calling the police, gives the gang a guided tour. Carlton then gets kidnapped by a golden bunny, and the animatronics start acting of their own accord. Carlton wakes up stuffed inside a springlock suit, and oh my god, plot twist, Dave was the killer all along with the real name William Afton. Charlie saves Carlton, but there's still a whole bunch of killer robots running around, but would you believe it, Golden Freddy is possessed by Michael Brooks, who saves the gang. Charlie kills, heavy air quotes there, Afton by springing the locks on his golden bunny suit, and the crew escape the pizzeria with little more than cuts, bruises, and a concussion on Carlton's part. Now for the twisted ones. On her 18th birthday, Charlie starts getting nightmares about her twin brother Sammy that cause her to believe that he's still alive. Charlie decides to return to Hurricane, which had recently been hit by a storm, where she stays with Jessica. Suddenly people start winding up dead, and Charlie's able to identify that the springlock suits were the murder weapon. Feeling a tad bit suspicious, Charlie decides to confirm the Afton kill and returns to the Freddy's location, but she finds the body and it very much so seems like Afton was killed this time around. In other news, Charlie and John are dating now with, I think, the least chemistry that I've ever seen in anything ever. And John, who works in construction, tells Charlie that her dad's old house was hit by the storm. They check it out and the storm broke into a sealed room with buried animatronics and sound illusion discs that change how the animatronics look. This is where the story goes crazy. Back to the Springlock victims plot, Charlie's able to deduce that the animatronics are after her, so she decides to go to them in hopes that they'll take her to Sammy. When Charlie doesn't show up for their date, John realizes what Charlie did, and he, Carlton's dad Clay, and Jessica go to find her. They don't know where they're going, but Clay reveals that he kept the haunted Freddy's animatronics in his basement since the events of the last book, so they go and ask for help. The animatronics wake up and the gang follow them. Charlie's taken to an unopened Freddy's location filled with illusion discs and balloon boys, which also happen to be under Henry's house. The balloon boys attack her, but John and co show up and save her. Suddenly, plot twist, it's revealed that Afton was alive all along, now fused with the golden bodysuit, becoming the spring trap that we know and love from the games. With little help from Clay's gun and the original FNAF animatronics, the group are able to get away, but Charlie pursues Afton in hopes of finding Sammy. Twisted Freddy consumes her, and in an attempt to get her out before the building collapses, the spring locks are triggered and Charlie's killed. Just before leaving the rapidly collapsing building, John catches a glimpse of Charlie's Aunt Jen, who's there for whatever reason. And in the final page of the book, when Charlie's grieving friends all meet up, Charlie rocks up, alive and well, but looking different enough for John and Charlie's other scarcely acknowledged love interest, Artie, to not buy it. That's not Charlie. Fourth closet, and a lot happens in this one, so brace yourself. We're now following John, who's still vehemently maintaining that his Charlie's dead and the new Charlie can't be her. He's also started talking to the dismembered head of Charlie's Robo-Rabbit, Theo, Theodore. In other news, Hurricane is celebrating the grand opening of a new contender in children's entertainment, Circus Baby's Pizza. Oh, and some mysterious woman is looking for certain parts in a scrapyard that the scrapyard worker had heard children's screams coming from. It's not too hard to deduce that these are the animatronics from Freddy's. And what's the plan for these animatronics? This woman and a mysterious man, 10 points if you can figure out who, are melting them down and injecting the substance into another animatronic bear. Clay tells John that he thinks it's kind of odd that Aunt Jen happened to be at Henry's house at the end of book 2, and that new Charlie might be hiding something. After an extremely awkward date with new Charlie, John goes to see Clay, who reveals that a little girl has gone missing the second in a month. And on the way home, John's creeped out by a weirdly robotic person dressed as a clown, which I'm sure won't be an issue down the line. And Clay is suddenly aware that someone's in his house. Oh, and Theodore's talking now, which John finds odd, so he goes to tell Clay, only to find him unconscious on the floor. In the hospital, Clay gives Jessica and John a set of photos of Charlie with her various friends before passing out again. Using the phrase that Theodore was saying, Jessica and John track down Aunt Jen, but new Charlie follows them. While hiding from her, John finds the robot that Henry used to kill himself, and more shockingly, the Charlie from the past 2 books unconscious in a box. Jen's killed by new Charlie, but John, Jessica, and the unconscious old Charlie escape. John realizes that Charlie's Ella doll is another iteration of Charlie, using an illusion disc to make her look less like a doll and more like a human child. And by adjusting the zoom on some microfilm of new Charlie that Clay gave him, he's able to kill the illusion to show her mannequin animatronic clown-like form that John saw the night that Clay was attacked. Jessica has the bright idea of hiding in new Charlie's car boot, and she winds up at Circus Baby's, but Charlie catches her, reveals her clown form, and Jessica blacks out. New Charlie, or Circus Baby, reveals that not only is she a mannequin-like animatronic and able to become a 100% convincing version of Charlie, she's able to puff out into the bubbly Circus Baby animatronic through pins all over her skin, and is possessed by Afton's daughter, Elizabeth. Afton, by the way, was our mystery man from earlier, did you guess? His goal is to use the spirits of the first set of animatronic Freddy's bots to bind himself to life bit by bit, replacing his own organs with endoskeleton parts. Jessica's taken to a room with the children who are disappearing. Meanwhile, John and old Charlie derive a plan to turn the earpieces from one of Charlie's science projects into devices to hide them from the robots. John sends Carlton to go get the earpieces. He has a brief encounter with Elizabeth when he sees her as a clown, but is successful and escapes. Carlton and Marla go to Circus Baby to find Jessica, and John and Charlie go back to Aunt Jen's house. Charlie finds a letter from Henry telling Jen to bury the 4th closet and that he's going to be with his daughter. Before they can deduce what that means, Elizabeth shows up and catches them. Old Charlie and John fight against Elizabeth, but when John's injured with his life on the line, old Charlie surrenders and agrees to talk. Elizabeth reveals that the real Charlie died years before and that Henry rebuilt her as a series of 4 robots brought to life by his grief, his agony. Elizabeth gives Charlie the rag doll, the first version of Charlie, and old Charlie uses the suicide machine to simultaneously destroy Elizabeth, herself, and the doll in one fell swoop. Meanwhile, Carlton and Marla use the earpieces to evade Funtime Freddy in hopes of finding Jessica, but they're too late. A Funtime Foxy of 2 heads, Mangle as we know it, takes one of the children, Jacob, before Carlton and Marla can reach them. Marla and Jessica use the earpieces to get the children out, and Carlton goes to find Jacob. Marla and Jessica are chased by an unmangled version of Funtime Foxy, but they escape with the children. Carlton meanwhile successfully finds Jacob, but also gets himself caught in the process by Afton, who injects him with Remnant. He blacks out. When he wakes, he's with Michael and the other missing children. They're trying to put pieces of a picture back together, and when they do, the spirits grow stronger. The haunted mechanisms turn on Afton, pushing him into a furnace, killing him, maybe, saving Jacob in the process. John goes to the cemetery where Sammy were buried. There he sees what he believes to be another iteration of Charlie, and a grave reading, beloved daughter, Charlotte Emily, 1980 to 1983. So I tried to make a timeline based on the books, and honestly, I just wound up with a lot of questions. For example, the gravestone tells us that the real Charlie was born in 1980. However, the Charlie that we follow in the first 2 books remembers being 7 in 1985, which either doesn't add up or I'm definitely going to fail my maths A level. Why would Charlie give his robot daughter a different date of birth if his intention was to make her as similar to the real Charlie as possible? It doesn't make sense to me. So in the interest of getting this video up in a timely manner, I'm just going to highlight a few things that I noticed on my reread that interested me, in the hopes of creating some new discussion or to put some new ideas on the table. And if you guys like this video, then I'll have a crack at writing a proper timeline of events. Okay, so the biggest question that I've always had concerning the books is this: what is the deal with Sammy? Was he real? Did Henry invent him for the sake of Charlie's memories? Are he and Charlie somehow the same person? It's all left very ambiguous. My conclusion is that Sammy has to be absolutely real. The main piece of evidence is that there's a picture of both twins in the newspaper article on the night that whichever twin disappeared. The Silver Eyes indicates that this happened on November 1st, 1981, but if this is supposed to be Charlie who's killed, then again it doesn't align with the gravestone in the 4th closet, but either way, there's no way that Henry faked this photo. It took him months of grieving before his descent into madness, and while he could have fabricated the photos Charlie found in their house, he couldn't have faked the photo that made it to print. As for what happened to Sammy, my guess is that he's living with his mother. We don't learn much about Mrs. Emily. I don't think we even know her name, but what we do know is that she left before Henry and Charlie moved to Hurricane, and that Henry says that she wouldn't know what to do with his little girl. The reason I think that Sammy lives with her is a line from a memory that Elizabeth shows Charlie at the end of 4th closet. In this memory, Aunt Jen tells Henry, your wife, your son, they can still be part of your life, but you have to let go of this. This being the obsession obsession with the fake Charlies. What that line tells me is that Mrs. Emily left because of Henry's uncontrollable grief, taking Sammy with her, that if Henry can recover from his depths of absolute despair, she might come back, that Henry has to choose between his wife and son and the daughter that his agony brought to life, and he chose his daughter. His wife might know what to do with Sammy, but only he knew what to do with his little girl. This might be a bit of a reach, considering it's based off a single line of dialogue in a flashback induced by the villain of the story, but I do think it's a pretty interesting angle. First off, I don't think Elizabeth is trying to trick Charlie here. Elizabeth only wants to show Charlie the truth, that she's not actually a human being. There's no reason to believe that these memories are fabricated either. And as for what it does to the story, well, it introduces two characters who've flown under the radar for years, who could very easily come back into play down the line. My next biggest question has always hovered around the character of Michael Brooks, and here I really don't have an answer that I'm attached to. He's very clearly the spirited side of Golden Freddy. It's spelled out over and over and over again, but it isn't up for debate. But it's interesting, isn't it? Firstly, the name, Michael, because he's not the only Michael in the series, is he? There's also the Michael we know from the games, the one who plays in the vast majority of the games, Michael Afton. And I know that Scott's not above reusing the same name, looking at the half dozen Jeremys in the corner over there, but it feels a bit odd how quickly he reused these names. Silver Eyes was released in September 2016, and the Custom Night DLC for Sister Location was released in December of the same year, only a few months later. It feels like an intentional choice. There are also these lines from Michael in the fourth closet that don't feel like a coincidence. I have to put them back together, Michael explained. See? He pointed out from the table at the pizzeria around them. Carlton squinted into the blurry horizon, seeing nothing at first, then they began to appear. He saw pages and pages of colourful drawings, some on the walls, others blowing through the air. They're all in pieces, Michael said. He shuffled the pages in front of him and found two that showed the same child. He placed one on top of the other and began to trace the lines. These go together, Michael said, holding up the picture. The two drawings had become one. The separate pages somehow bonded together. The lines were clearer and the colours more vibrant. What are you putting back together? Carlton asked. My friends. Consider the language that's used here. Doesn't it feel a lot like the end of FNAF 4? We're still your friends. Do you still believe that? I will put you back together. In a speech associated with a golden Fredbear plush? I really don't know what to make of it, but it certainly seems possible that the Michael in the books is somehow connected to the Michael in the games. He's always differentiated from the other missing children in the books, and it might do something to explain the repeated line in Immortal and the Restless, the baby isn't mine. What if it's because he's really somehow Michael Brooks, the child that William snatched all those years ago? Obviously, I'm not sure how that would work with Michael in the games not being dead, but considering he survived having his insides removed, replaced with an endoskeleton, and then vomited up, Mike clearly isn't your average guy. If the Charlie bots could exist without a spirit inside of them, why not Mike? What if he was some form of experiment by Afton on his search for immortality, something based on the Charlie bots or something? And what words appear when Mike sees Golden Freddy in those early games? It's me. It's me. Again, I'm not sure where all of this would lead, but it definitely feels like it might lead somewhere. And you have to remember when in the series these books were released, between FNAF 4 and Sister Location. And in FNAF 4 there were two major questions. Who possessed the puppet and who possessed Golden Freddy? If Charlie possessed the puppet, as confirmed by FNAF 6, then Michael could be very well possess Golden Freddy just as he does in the books. Another Michael-related question concerns the other missing children who Carlton encounters. There are 5, which would gel with the number of possessed animatronics, but there's a catch. Of the other spirits, there are 2 boys and 2 girls, and we get 3 of their names. Susie, Fritz, and Cassidy. Cassidy. She's supposed to be the one in Golden Freddy. That's what we learn from the security logbook. And while it's entirely possible that 2 spirits possess the same suit, that would leave us with a spirit missing. Either Gabriel or Jeremy based on the FNAF 6 Lawkeeper ending. And I'm willing to believe that the names of the missing children is something that would change between the books and the games, but the other names are all consistent. Again, it feels intentional, and I'd love to hear your take on it. I don't really have an answer here, but it's these little changes, these little choices, these tiny differences between the games and the books that don't feel accidental. It wouldn't have changed a single thing if they replaced Cassidy in the 4th closet with Gabriel, for instance, which really makes you wonder why they did it. And finally, what about the Charlie that John sees at the end of 4th closet? Did Henry make her? Because his letter to Jen only mentions the 4 closets, and considering the message of the letter is to make sure these things never get out into the world, you'd think he'd tell her if there are any more of the things lying around. But who else could have made her, really? Afton seems unlikely considering how jealous of Henry's ability to make Charlie he was. His only notable technological achievement was making something that could walk. But how many more Charlies are out there? You don't set up a tease like this at the end of a final book in a series. There isn't a plan to use it in your wider universe. Which of course begs the question, what is the plan for them? So these are my fairly surface level impressions of the FNAF novels, but there's so much more to explore here if you want to see that. I know that these books are incredibly controversial as FNAF lore goes, but I think that they carry a lot more than people give them credit for, or at least that they have an intentional, interesting story, even if you hold it as a separate one to the one of the games. If you want me to explore that, then please let me know, because I'm having a lot of fun here, and I'd love to hear your takes on any of the questions I've brought up about these stories. So apart from that, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe if you did. It lets me know that this is something that you want to see more of, and I'll see you next week with another video. Bye!